Let me clarify, because Dave's not woke right. Dave's a libertarian, right?
Yeah.
He's an anti-war libertarian. We could get into whether he's woke as a libertarian, as an what I call a critical government theorist.
So you came out with this idea of woke right, and I would say I believe there is the woke right in theory. I believe horseshoe theory completely, because you see it every day how close a lot of the people on the far left and the far right actually are. But I kind of want to start, like, what would be your definition of woke?
That's what I said earlier. It's that you believe the fundamental organizing principle of society is basically oppressor versus oppressed. But what you have is a in-group, and again, it's got to be how society is organized in its totality. It's a system of power. It's not a location of power. One of the key points that the critical race theorists made, just to clarify this, is it's not that we have institutional racism, right? And in fact, they made the point often with the civil rights era, we overcame a lot of our individual, but not all, and a lot of our institutional racism, but that wasn't it. It's structural and systemic racism. It's an all-pervasive operating principle for society that we're actually up against, which is why everything and everything else was also racist. So Robin DiAngelo said the question is not did racism occur, but how did racism manifest in the situation? Racism is in the sense imminent, that it's underneath every interaction, right? That's a different view than some people are racist or some institutions are racist. So woke means believing that about some insider group has created a system dynamics for the entire operation of society that's designed to marginalize and exclude some deserving group that sees itself as an excluded class, rather than, sometimes there's oppression or the government doesn't like, because of diversity we have to do this, unfair hiring practices and whatever else.
Yeah, and so with the woke right, I could totally see where you're coming from with that, because there are a lot of people on the woke right who or on the right who would say, who are just as racist. They want a white suppressive society. It's not just white supremacists, but there's the people who only talk about Jewish people. Or they only talk about what's happening in the hood with black people.
And the question is,
and they're obsessed with race.
Is that their organizing principle for society, right? The DEI is an organizing principle for society that is designed to exclude not just by their skin color or whatever people like them, but people who think like them, people who are like them. If you believe it's the fundamental organizing principle of society that is so deeply entrenched that the only way you can overcome it is through a revolution, because and through critique, you can't actually make arguments and counter to it that people might find more persuasive. You have to make critique after critique, because there's nothing you can do from within the system to change the system. Then you're in a woke situation. So it's not, I dislike what Israel's doing. That's not woke. You're perfectly free to doubt a state. You're perfectly free to doubt the activities of the Mossad or the government, the current government, or the government in general. It doesn't particularly matter. But if you believe that the Jews secretly rig everything in the world so that you can't get ahead, you're woke about Jews.
Yeah.
And if you think that, the purpose of the DEI apparatus is not to install a Marxist program, which it is, but you think it's specifically to make sure white people can't succeed in society, you're woke about DEI. You are misunderstanding what it is in a way that you say, basically, I can't succeed because there's a system of power preventing me from succeeding. And that's a different mentality. The challenge is that left and right don't think the same way. So with the left, they're generally, in a sense, universalist in a way. They think all of humanity is intrinsically, let's use CRT, they're intrinsically anti-racist, whatever that means, or intrinsically socialist, or intrinsically queer if you need a different touch point, intrinsically, fat acceptance, whatever touch point you need to understand. But we'll say intrinsically anti-racist. But we've been alienated from anti-racism by the imposition of racial identity and racism by the white power structure that created a form of private property called whiteness that they now impose. So we have whiteness, we exclude everybody else from whiteness, therefore everybody else is oppressed by the fact of white supremacy of that kind. Therefore, we need to seize the means of production of what it means to be racially identified so that we can overthrow the system. That's CRT, right?
Yeah.
That's woke. So there's a universalism there. All human beings on Earth, in their opinion, are alienated from their true being by dint of whiteness and white supremacy. White people are alienated because they become oppressors. People of color is the term of art, and especially black and indigenous people are alienated by dint of having racism applied to them, imposed on them is the word they usually use. And so everybody's alienated from their true sense of who they are by this system. The right does not think in that universal. You're not trying, everybody is not something. They think in terms of the group, the nation in particular. And the nation might be defined politically, ethnically, or culturally, but there's an intrinsic nation that should be the inheritors of society, but we became too tolerant and these interlopers came in and displaced the heritage people who should inherit the society. So they're not thinking, it's not racism, it's the people who should be the inheritors of the American, literally, heritage.
Yeah.
Are not getting it now because we were too tolerant. So rather than we need to increase tolerance on the left, we now need to decrease tolerance on the right in order to restore the proper order. And only those of us who've been properly, awakened to what suffering means by being marginalized by this system, whether it's anti-whiteness or whether it's the post-war liberal consensus, or whether it's a Jewish conspiracy theory, anti-Semitism is the name for the Jewish conspiracy theory. We have awakened to a higher truth, therefore we are elite, and we need to take power to control, to make sure that this doesn't happen and the common good can come about again.
Yeah, and I think that's where I had concerns, because we were talking about this the other day, and I told you, I said, I feel like the way that it's been presented, and I've seen it online, and being the way that it just kind of comes across has always been, I always thought you were a little bit overbroad, where I would say that I think, because I would see, and you brought up Israel, and I think that's the big one, because it was always the fight with Dave Smith, and I kind of looked at that and I'm like, Dave Smith is more like me, a libertarian, where I don't believe our government should be funding any foreign nation. I think Israel has a right to exist, but I'm very concerned about what they're doing in Gaza and some of the ways that they're handling the operations. And so I have concerns, even as a veteran myself. And so when I see you going after somebody like Dave Smith for some of his views, now I understand Dave sometimes runs in these crowds, and he has friends, but I also feel like a little bit of that's guilty by association.
Yeah, well, with Dave, let me clarify, because Dave's not woke right. Dave's a libertarian, right? Yeah. He's an anti-war libertarian. We could get into whether he's woke as a libertarian, as an what I call a critical government theorist, which is the same critical theory, but now government's the system of power. We don't have to get into the details of that. But what happened was, I didn't actually even know who Dave Smith is. You ever go to like a park or something and like a little dog starts following you and it just keeps following you and you don't know how you got this dog that's following you? Well, I know how I picked up Dave as my little dog here, but it's like this incidental thing. Dave was saying something about Israel at a time when I was being pressed for examples of what is the woke right. I didn't know who Dave was, but he was saying the same thing that the anti-Semites were saying. Okay. Right? And I said, here's an example of woke right. I didn't say it that way. I said woke right. Just quote tweeted him and said woke right. So Dave, and lots of people, obviously Dave has some, we'll call them very active followers and supporters, latched onto the idea of me calling him woke right, and that's the little dog that started following me, and it's never stopped following me. And I'm like, please go away, little dog. You're not woke right. Maybe you're a critical government theorist, or you're just an anti-war libertarian or whatever, but you're not even on the right, so you're not woke right. Like, woke right means that you have all the woke worldview and the woke practices like cancel culture, victimhood identity, identity politics, class-based conflict orientation, etc. And you advocate right-wing positions and claim right-wing as an identity, right? Not even conservative, right-wing. Okay. Dave's a libertarian, doesn't apply. Yeah. Okay, so I messed up. I called Dave woke right when I was looking for examples. He said something that sounds the same as what they say. I didn't even know who he was. He's just this vague character that was on the fringes of my awareness on Twitter. He has a big following, but I didn't follow him, so I didn't know who he was. And it's like, that was so many months ago, and it's just like never gone away.
It's not going away.
And it's like, I don't know how to, like, there's this kind of verifying people hoax going on about what I've said about this issue, and a lot of it's not people making a mistake. It is deliberate.
Yep.
Where I have said some very specific, very clear, sometimes not as clear things about woke right, and there has been a deflection campaign to make people believe that I've applied it in a ridiculously irresponsible way, in a completely vague way. It's a term with no meaning. I just told you what the meaning is. It's extremely specific. It applies to a small percentage of the political right, if we use that framing. And a lot of people are like taking tweets that I've had out of context. Some of them are doctored. Things that I've written, again, out of context. Things that I said years ago, again, out of context. And pinning me to say, oh, well, James would say the founding fathers are woke right. No, I don't. I've given long arguments for why that's not the case. For example, that they believed in divided powers and no centralized authority, right?
Yeah.
That'd be one reason. Woke likes seizing the means of production of society, not distributing it to the individuals.
Yeah.
It's individualist versus collectivist here, right? But that's a lot of other reasons. And James would say that, oh, he says Nick Fuentes and, Yoram Hazony and Nate Fisher and Dave Smith are all the same. No, I don't. I've never said they're all the same. I said that just like you have race woke people and you have queer woke people and you have feminist woke people and you have your annoying cousin who you can't have Thanksgiving dinner with anymore. You have Kamala Harris, and then you have Antifa, right? We call them woke. Nobody hesitates to say Antifa's woke, Kamala Harris is woke, and my annoying cousin is woke, even though they're very different people. It's the same thing on the right. There are different groups at different levels of radicalization and different levels of behavior. And then you got poor puppy dog Dave Smith has latched on because I called him woke right once or twice maybe, and he never let it go. I have this bad habit also, like if people poke me, I just keep poking back. Like James called Matt Walsh woke right. Well, it's not exactly. Matt said, maybe I'm woke right. And I was like, well, yeah, you probably are, right? But I'm just being glib. I'm just being a jerk back because he's being a jerk, right? It was just like give as you take or whatever, right? So Matt's probably not woke right either. But it's like, no, I'm very specific about who I mean it by. But one other thing, like your cousin versus Kamala Harris versus your gender studies professor versus Antifa, it's not just that there are different ways of being woke. There's also like you can be a little woke. Right? We all know Democrat people who are mostly normal and then they're a little woke and you kind of like, they're hard to talk to, they're a little woke, right? But you can generally get along with them. And then there's the people like, they're just screaming all the time. They're like evergreen meltdown people. Same thing with woke right. There are people who have a little bit of this like, I'm the oppressed white guy or whatever, and then you have like the full blast, we need a theocracy to solve this with only white people, in theology world, they call that kinism. So we need a kinist theology or theocracy, or whatever. That's pretty damn woke, actually.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I think that there's a lot of layers to the issue. And like you said, I was going to say Matt Walsh is another example. I wouldn't necessarily consider him woke right.
No, he's a curmudgeon is what he and a provocateur.
Right, exactly. So there is a level of like what I would say is like the far right, like the Groypers and stuff like that, probably woke right. Yes, very much woke right.
Very much woke right.
I would very much say that they are. But then you start to move a little bit further, and you do have what I used to just consider social conservatives, who are more socially apt and want more of a theocracy. They would say, everybody can live in America, but we want a Christo-nationalist society, and that's where I would say, the Matt Walshes of society probably live in that area. And I wouldn't necessarily consider that woke, but like you're saying, there is still an identitarian factor to it. I think that's kind of the overarching theme. And you're right.
There's a gray boundary. It's like your annoying woke cousin, and it's like there's like this fuzzy, like they get real annoying when issues around race come up, but other than that, they're like pretty normal, right? There's this. It's not like a binary, like you're totally normal or you're all the way woke. It's a dip out of realism and into idealism is what it is. So you can be a little more idealistic until finally you leave reality entirely. But most people have this sort of unexamined blend of being realistic about the world, but a little idealistic. I wish it was better and different, right? But in a way that's actually philosophically idealist or constructivist, which is what woke thinking is.
And what's really interesting, because even in the libertarian community, we do have this, we say left-right paradigm, I guess.
Paradigm.
And paradigm. Thank you. And so it would be this idea, like, if you look at somebody like there's the left side, I guess you would say, who do view like they have the woke ideas when it comes to like the LGBT community and some of the other things, you know, and you see it and it's like, well, that's pretty woke, but you also just believe in individual liberty and you're not necessarily doing on that, but your views on this fall within that woke category, which is where I think Dave fell in on the right, and he has some of those views that you could see blending in, and you could see why he associates with some of those people in different aspects, but doesn't necessarily fit in the category. But James, I appreciate you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
I hope this clarifies some stuff up too, and
I hope
it helps
so.
get you uncanceled, you know?
Yeah, we'll see if I get uncanceled.
Thank you for watching this clip. If you liked it, make sure to click that like and subscribe button and head over to Free the People to watch the full interview. And while you're there, check out all the amazing work the team is creating.